This is the Transcend in Life podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson, taking you from fear to freedom.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Transcend in Life. I'm excited about today. I actually had a chance to be a guest on his podcast. Chris Bello is a college graduate that quit his corporate job 3 years in. He wanted to take hold of the reins of life and write his own story. After struggling with one side hustle after another, he went all in on residential real estate, where he has quickly caught momentum. Chris is also host of the top-rated business podcast, the Entrepreneur Motivation Podcast, where he documents his journey and interviews incredible guests. Chris's motto is less dreaming and more doing. Brother, I love that saying. I mean, less dreaming, more doing. Let's talk about that. How you doing, man?
Good, man. How are you? And it's great to connect again. Once again, it was awesome having you on my show. Lots of great nuggets. So less dreaming, more doing. That's my mantra.
Yeah. So where'd that come from, man? Dreams are bad and doing's better, or it's a little bit of both? How did you come up with that?
I think it's a little bit of both. I know too many people are dreamers, right? So many people are like, oh, you're a dreamer. Being a dreamer is looked down upon because it looks like you're not doing anything about it, right? You're just sitting there, you're dreaming all day, you're daydreaming. You need a little bit of the dreams and the inspiration, but you need some action behind it, right? So dreams backed by action and a goal with a deadline, a plan with a deadline becomes a goal. That's kind of the thinking behind that. So I really love just taking action. Sometimes I take too much action too fast without planning enough, and it can bite me in the butt. But I like the idea of just taking more action. When in doubt, do something.
Well, that's certainly where a lot of people get caught up, is they sit there and they plan and they plan and they plan. They don't do anything. So taking action before doing too much planning, I think I would rather you obviously miss to that side.
Yeah.
You talked about doing in your intro kind of the side hustle until you really landed on residential real estate. What was that journey like? Why? How did real estate come to be kind of your forte?
Yeah, so the way the journey goes, and it's kind of funny because the setup I have now, if you're watching the video for those listening, I have my first real estate check framed. You can't really see it too well, but that was my first deal. And then to the side is my college degree. It's not as important to me as this thing that makes me money and makes me happy, and I love helping people. But my journey wasn't really linear, right? I think most of our journeys are not. So I got a college degree in business. I studied supply chain. I worked in oil and gas. And I thought that was my path. I made it, right? So I made it. I got my dream job. I got a great signing bonus. And 3.5 years in, I was just like, man, I was looking at the people in the offices, at the managers and the directors, and I was just thinking, I don't want that for myself. I need to do my own path, right? Chart my own course. Of course, like many entrepreneurs do, I started reading Rich Dad Poor Dad and Think and Grow Rich and 4 Hour Work Week. And I was like, man, I'm smart. I got the college degree, right? I got here. I was getting a little bit like too cocky, like, oh, I can do anything. I'm not going to fail. And sure enough, I quit the job cold turkey. And I was like, well, what am I going to do next? Right. So I had a product I was working on with a friend. We tried to go all in on manufacturing something. Didn't quite pan out. That was one of those things I didn't plan enough. I just started putting money into it in time without my due diligence. And whenever it was clear that that was not going to quite work the way we intended, I was starting to dabble with side hustles, flipping things on Amazon and garage sales and trying to make money here and there. I'd make $50 here. I'd buy something. It wouldn't sell. So I kind of lose money on something, just break even. And I was just starting to figure things out, right? Building websites, trying to sell stuff, wrote a book on Amazon that like barely got any sales. I did the whole thing. And then I finally started reading books like The One Thing. And I was like, okay, Chris, shiny object syndrome, get rid of all of these things you're working on and get very laser focused. And that's how I landed on real estate.
That's awesome, man. I mean, so obviously you're not afraid to fail. That's the one thing I heard in that is like,
I love failing.
yeah, congrats, man. You failed. You got your ass kicked. It's like, yes, you're winning.
Thank you. Like, what's next?
Yeah. So you have that part of the formula down, which is awesome. That's where a lot of people get caught up. But what was it about real estate? What was kind of the key that really made sense to where it's like, this is my thing. I'm not only good at this, but I really enjoy it. What was it about real estate? And what is it about real estate that just kind of floats your boat?
Yeah, so one of the side hustles that I landed upon actually kind of led me to real estate in a weird way. So I heard about cell phone flipping where you can buy phones that are cracked and buy them for really cheap, pay cash, and then you can flip them and sell them on eBay and other platforms like that for a margin and for a profit. And I realized very quickly that this was kind of a grind and it was quite a bit of work to make, 50 or $100 here and there. And then I realized like there's something called real estate wholesaling, which is basically flipping a contract. And if you ever see those "We Buy Houses" signs everywhere on the corner of the street, they call them bandit signs. They're not really legal in a lot of areas, but they do work. So that's why people still do them. But I started listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast. I learned about this thing called wholesaling. And I realized that that's basically what people are doing. They're flipping contracts on houses for 10, 15, $20,000 profits. And it's the same thing that I was doing with a phone, except instead of the bill of sale saying, selling this for $200, I bought it for whatever, you're doing that with a property. And so the dollar signs were bigger, and you're also making more impact because a lot of people are in tough situations, behind on payments, cannot afford their taxes, that type of thing. And that coupled with the fact that I'd heard that so much wealth in the world has been created through real estate and investments, that's what really got me focused and just saying, like, let me focus in on this a little more deeply.
That's cool, man. And to your point, that's one thing I don't think people see is you're really dealing with people's dreams. So it's funny, less dreaming, more doing, but you're actually helping people with their dream.
Achieve their dreams. Yes.
So frequently in middle America, their biggest asset is their home. Like,
Right.
so that's pretty unique. I never thought of it that way. One of the things you said is you love to fail. And that's funny to hear, but any entrepreneur knows exactly what you're saying. So, what is your process when you deal with failure? What's kind of your like, all right, it happened. Do you have a process that you go through so it doesn't seem like this catastrophic failure?
Yes, so I don't necessarily have a tried and true process, but it's just something that I've become more comfortable with over time because it does take a particular type of crazy person to continue to try things after failing over and over again, especially when you're putting it out there into the world like, "Hey, I'm going to try this thing." I did a Kickstarter for the product I was creating. It failed. I didn't delete all the posts and pretend it never happened. I created a podcast, right? And I started to talk about it. Hey, this is a product I try to do. I thought it was going to work. I was overly optimistic. I put my life savings into it. I blew through my life savings. I just shared the story and other people could relate because it's not like you're going to be perfect and you're going to knock it out of the park on your first try. And so as I started to do more things and I pivoted from side hustle failure to side hustle failure, I became more comfortable with this didn't work. Maybe I wouldn't call it like a failure. It was like a test. My hypothesis didn't work. How can I tweak it? How can I test it again? And I continuously just tweak things until it works better every single time. So I like a quote that says, "You only fail if you quit. Otherwise, you're just learning. You either win or you learn."
So those people that are like, all right, cool. So I found what I want to do. What are some of your tips to having found success in real estate? Because I'm sure that along the way you found some, again, routine, process, hacks, something that said,
Absolutely.
yeah. So what are some of those that really stuck out for you so that you've seen the success that you've seen in real estate?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So, firstly, I would recommend getting very focused on what that thing is because at first I clearly didn't know. Many of us try too many things at once. And anytime I see a friend who's doing way too many things at once, my first thing's like, dude, pick one thing that you want to go all in on and really try not to do the rest just yet because if you're doing 10% on all these things, you're not going to see the momentum you want. So, as soon as I got laser focused, I got specifically focused on wholesaling first and I joined a team. I kind of put my tail between my legs and was like, I don't want to work for anyone, but I need a mentor of some sort. And so I worked with the company for a year. That first check behind me was written from them on my first deal that I got. And I was only with them for a year. I mean, I was very entrepreneurial and I knew I wanted to go out on my own. And so here I am on my own as a licensed real estate agent slash investor. But I just knew that I had to continue to go out there and just try things and learn as much as I can. So as soon as you discover what it is, and I almost forgot what the question was, but I was like, oh, wait, I got a thread. I remember what it was again. And that's how entrepreneurs are sometimes. We're all over the place, right? So you got to stay focused, Chris. I tell myself that daily. So as soon as you get focused on that one thing that you want to get really good at, align yourself with mentors that are successful in that space already, whether you need to pay them or work for them or just be their best friend or bird dog for them is something that investors use. Try to add value to investors who are where you want to be or whatever it is that you want to do and get mentorship from them, right? Like you don't want to get advice from someone who's never done something that you want to do because they'll just kill your dreams. But if you're talking to the people who are successfully closing 5, 6, 7 deals a month like clockwork, and if that's what you want to do, and that's what I wanted to do, I got in with those folks. And within 3, 4 months, I was doing 2, 3 deals consistently every single month. And I actually just had my biggest month in October a couple of days ago in real estate on my own. And my previous biggest month was in August. So it's just, I'm beating my own records consistently now, which has been very exciting to see.
That's awesome, man. Because I mean, so often I think people don't want to sit back and be, like you said, bird dog for somebody else, or
It's not glamorous all the time, right? You're like, oh, I don't want to go they make you go put the signs up sometimes. They're like, hey, go put out 100 of these signs. If we get any leads, you can come with us on the appointment. And you don't want to do that sometimes, right? Doesn't sound very glamorous.
yeah, it's not, but education is expensive, right? I mean, that's even,
It
I'm looking
is.
at your diploma over your left shoulder, and it's like, hey,
It
that
wasn't
wasn't
cheap.
free, right? And it's like, so education is expensive. That's some of the things that you have to commit to or sacrifice in order to really learn your craft. So I love that you said that, man. One of the things
Thank
that
you.
you've talked about throughout is, and this is such a layup for me because I love reading and books, but you mentioned the one thing, great book. I love it. It's definitely one that I've enjoyed. What are some of the other ones that you've read that you're like, man, that was really impactful to me being succeeding as an entrepreneur?
Absolutely. So I'm a voracious reader. I guess I say voracious, but I mean, I read every single morning, 20 or 30 minutes at least, sometimes more. But a book that I really just devoured quickly was Essentialism by Greg McKeown. McKeown, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but Essentialism was such a great book. And that's another one. I've been very, not minimalistic, but very like essentialist is what that book is kind of going off of. And what it means is focus on the few things that truly matter, the Pareto principle, the essential few instead of the trivial many. So there's so many things that occupy our time. Even your friends and your family will give you all these ideas of things you could do. And I'm like, yeah, I could do those things, but does that mean that I should necessarily do them? Are they really the best use of my time right now? Because in a world of so many distractions and opportunities, which are really distractions sometimes, maybe they're not the best use of your time. Even opportunities can be that way. Saying no to so many things that come your way that may be pulling at you, you may feel like it's worth pursuing, having that discernment and being able to say no to the things that you think are not really going to move the needle. That takes skill and practice, especially if you're a yes man. In the corporate role, I would say yes to everything. I want it to be helpful, right? I want it to help everybody. Oh, you need this? Yes. Okay, I'll do that. Don't worry, I can help on that project. And all of a sudden, I spread myself too thin where I couldn't get anything done. So, Essentialism is probably one of my top books that I've recently read. On another note, I read Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and that's kind of a different type of book than the typical entrepreneurship or mindset thing. And I found that to be very interesting because it really made me think of like, wow, what if I just focus more on letting go sometimes instead of trying to control every outcome? What if I just envision the perfect future that I want to have for myself and try to tie the feeling, like how would it feel if I had accomplished that future, and really bringing that emotion into it so that I feel as if I've already had that outcome. And then the path is just kind of set out, quantum physics and all that crazy science stuff that's hard to believe sometimes. You're just like, oh, is that really how it works? It's really cool to just believe that, like, if I know what I want and I focus on it and how I feel when I'll achieve it, the universe will sort itself out, doors will open, the path will appear. And so I've been living by that. And I swear I've been making the most money I've ever made with the least amount of work in the last few months.
Yeah, you said something that I hope everybody hears. Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And that idea,
So true.
especially for people pleasers, is look, you are saying yes, but every time you do that, you're taking away from your family, your kids, your job, your whatever it is. So sometimes the most selfish thing you can do is say yes. And it's interesting if you think about it, it's so different. So that's just a learned behavior that you started to figure out because you're a pretty young guy, man, to figure this out so early. Congrats.
Thank,
That's awesome.
thank you.
But yeah, how'd you figure that out?
Yeah, so that actually came over time through reading books like, the one thing, essentialism. I'm trying to think. There's a lot of books that talk about the power of saying no. I know Warren Buffett. Someone sent me an article where I guess there's some story. I don't remember if it happened or if it was just like an article someone wrote about Warren Buffett. But there's some exercise they did where there's 25 things, and Warren Buffett told him circle 5 things, and that guy picked 5 things. And he's like, well, I want to do all these other things too. And after he picked the 5, I think he made him narrow it down even further and was basically saying, don't look at anything else until you accomplish these top 2 or 3 things. And it's crazy because we all have that. We want to do so many more things, right? I could start another podcast. I could do this. I could get a separate license instead of just doing real estate. I could do like tax planning. I could do so many things, but could you really, right? There's another quote. I love quotes. So it says, you can be good at everything, or you can be good at anything, but you can't be good at everything. So you can really become an expert at whatever it is that you want. But if you're trying to do it all, it's not going to work. So it really just came over time. I still struggle sometimes. I say yes. And then I kind of go back like a week later. I'm like, hey, I said yes to that thing. I'm sorry. I was a little excited and I love you. We're great friends. Our relationship means a lot, but I'm just overcommitted at this time. I can't dedicate that time like I thought I would be able to you.
Yeah, quotes definitely leave some clues. I mean, the jack of all trades, a master of none comes to mind when you're talking. I'm like, yeah, man,
Yeah.
that's what that means is why don't you get really good at 1 or 2 or 3 things and excel at them? That doesn't mean you can't do something down the line, but do really, get to a master level at this one thing. Gosh, I had a line. Oh, the podcast. That's what I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
So tell me how did this come about, man? Because I'm sure you've learned a lot. I was fortunate to be a guest on there. It's a really cool setup the way you do it, but where did it all come from?
Thank you. Yeah. So, like I mentioned, I mean, I was in oil and gas. I had a great job, had savings, never had an entrepreneurial. Actually, that's a lie. I had some entrepreneurial bones in my body when I was a kid. I would do magic shows and stuff with friends. But I quit the job. I tried to pursue this patented invention with a friend, and I wouldn't say it necessarily failed. I just ran out of money and basically passion for it. And so I had a pivot. But I started the podcast shortly after in October of 2017. So the timeline, quit the job in March 2017 when the patent was filed, realized by November that it wasn't going to be ready anytime soon and we were going to have more issues than I anticipated. And so that in October, I actually started the podcast about the products I was working on, the flipping, all the different things that I was trying and all the things that weren't working. And it was just a way for me to kind of document my journey, share my learnings. And I honestly had a couple of seasons where I just talked about founders. I talked about Jeff Bezos and how he started. I looked up his story and I shared it. I had a whole season on entrepreneurs like Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, how they did it, what they thought about, things that they struggled with. And I just started to learn that way. And it evolved a little bit, right? We started having more conversational podcasts like the one that you and I had. And I've been really using this as a tool to connect with amazing people across the world. I just talked to John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneurs on Fire. That's a huge podcast that I was listening to in my cubicle when I was starting to get entrepreneurial. Fast forward 3 years later, I just talked to him like 2 weeks ago, like he was a friend almost. And it's really cool to see the types of conversations that you can have. And so here we are. I'm about to pass 50,000 monthly downloads I was at the 49,800 mark or something like that. So it's been really cool to see the growth. And I have a goal to hit 100,000 downloads a month by November 2023. So I think I'm on my way.
I would say you're certainly on your way, man. But I think what's cool is that's not how you started. You weren't like, hey, I want X amount of downloads.
I
You
just wanted to
decided to start
record.
sharing some value, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to share some value, and I didn't do it for the money because at first when I made that product, I was like, how can I make money? I had no audience. I was just trying to make money. And this time I focused on adding value to the audience, and I still haven't really thought through how to make money. I've been doing it for 3 years and people are like, "Are you making money off of it?" I'm like, "Not really." I mean, I've closed some real estate deals and referrals from it, but I haven't been focused on that. But now I have a loyal, passionate audience, and whenever I'm ready to put a product up or offer coaching or a course, I will actually have an audience to launch to instead of nothing, right? So, and again, it's not about the money, it's about the impact and the conversations from the types of things like being here with you right now, for example.
It is funny. There's almost a judgment to it. Well, are you making money? And if you're not, like, okay,
You're not
should I
successful.
stop? Yeah,
Right.
it's so funny. So tell me, what is the biggest thing you've got out of doing this podcast? Because I say it all the time. I get more value, I think, out of this than my audience can. I
I
have
feel the
met,
same
like you
way.
said, some awesome people. You get to hear
Yeah.
some amazing stories. So what is some of the big ones you've had?
So I'm on a weekly mastermind call with people who've been in my industry for 25, 30 years. They kind of saw me as a mentee and they took me under their wing. And they were mentioning they've seen me grow so much in the last year, just in my business, in my life, in the wisdom. I'm wise beyond my years. They were saying I just turned 30 this year, but they feel like I'm wiser than most, I don't know, millennials that they know. In that I attributed that to my podcasts. I was telling them, hey, I'm talking to like 2 or 3 millionaires a week sometimes, not just millionaires, but like I know money is a scorecard in a way of success. The more value you add, you're monetarily rewarded for that many times. But I'm talking to so many successful people now for my podcast and when I'm on other shows that when I have a problem that I'm struggling with in real time, like, hey, this is happening in my business. I'm getting too many calls. I can't handle them all. What would you suggest in that situation? And someone who has a 30 or 50 person software company who figured this problem out 5 years ago, they're telling me, Chris, you need a customer service person to answer all the phone calls. And maybe 1/10 of those calls needs to actually get directed to you. Whereas I might have been just like cluelessly, asking friends or family who don't even have this problem and would have the wrong advice for me, which is what a lot of people do. In my industry, there's people who started with me, got their license with me. They're asking other people who aren't even doing any deals for advice. That didn't make sense to me, right? So that's been my biggest learning is getting to leech off of or borrow from the knowledge of my guests. Not I don't like the word leech, borrow.
I like borrow a lot better too, brother. I think we'll stick with
I
that
was
one.
like, let's edit leech out, right?
We got that one for you. You know what I would say is, just as being a guest on your show, you're completely vulnerable and authentic to your audience. You don't sit there and have to look a certain way. You just go, man. And I
Thank
remember it
you.
was like there was not necessarily a script per se, but it was like we're just gonna talk.
We're just having a fun conversation. And I'm kind of like keeping an eye over here because I got my two cats. They like to jump up on stuff too. So sometimes they'll jump up here. You'll see their tail in the camera. I want to be an authentic, regular person because if it's too perfect, people can't relate to you, right? If I'm in a studio and everything's perfect, it seems like something that's so far out of reach versus here. I'm sitting here, my pets are there. You might hear the dog bark, right? You mentioned that on my show, have a little bit of grace. I think my dog barked in the background while we were talking. And so I think that authenticity, people really can feel that and relate to you much more than if you were trying to be like, oh, I've never had failures, here's all my wins and I'm not sharing the losses. I want to be transparent.
It is cool. I will say, for a 30-year-old, because age is just a number, man. And the whole
It is.
millennial
It
thing, I
is.
really don't care about they're this or that. That's such a generalization. But I will say
Right.
this: at your age, to be as vulnerable and open as you are, that's pretty remarkable. And that's really cool to see. And it's going to
Thank
take you
you.
so far.
I
Um,
appreciate that.
yeah, of course, brother. One of the things you mentioned is productivity and mindset hacks that you could share with the audience? I think anybody listening is like, dude, I want to be more productive. And I certainly want my mindset to be even stronger than it is today. So what are some of those that you can offer to the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I created a free guide that has some productivity hacks, and I can definitely give the link to that later. But I can definitely just talk off the top of my head because I've evolved in a way since I created that. I have more hacks and more things like that. So depending on the type of business, one of my tips that I've recently had, I was sharing this with my mastermind group that this has been my biggest breakthrough this year. I think in terms of optimizing my time, and I kind of used COVID. The COVID environment really pushed people to go online to Zoom calls, right? So I kind of took advantage of it in a way to just put all my appointments on Zoom if possible, because you can connect face to face. It goes so much further than just a phone call. And it also prevents me from having to drive. You know, a lot of people don't want to meet face to face right now, or they're starting to in some areas. But being a supply chain major, the more you can reduce driving, unnecessary scheduling, and meeting, the faster things can be and the more streamlined they can be. So I currently use a tool called Calendly. There's different booking tools, but Calendly is the one I've been using. And that, with a Zoom integration, I send out certain booking links for every appointment. Hey, you want to get lunch? Use this link, book a time. It coordinates with my calendar in real time. You want to do a podcast interview? Here's the link. I only allow 2 podcast interviews every Tuesday afternoon from this time window to this time window. And once those 2 are booked, you have to pick the next week or the following week. And it goes like that. And so I've been very intentional about building a schedule that's optimized. And most recently, I removed booking from Friday and Sunday so that I can just spend more time doing fun stuff. So last Friday, for example, I went to iFly and I just did indoor skydiving because I had no appointments. I was like, cool, I have nothing on my calendar. I'm going to go take some me time to celebrate my largest real estate month. And so that's been one of my hacks. We can talk about as I've got several more if you want to dive into them, but getting rid of booking, because there's a lot of back and forth. Hey, does this time work? Does that time work? No, I'm busy. Calendly booking link eliminates all of those things. And that's just calendly.com. I'm not affiliated. I don't have an affiliate link. It's just, I keep on bragging about them this year to all my friends.
Well, I hear that as time management is what you're doing, because you
For
literally
sure.
said, yeah, you're intentional about, all right, Tuesday I can do 2 of the podcasts. And I think you said Friday and Sunday. That's some me time, which that's interesting coming from a real estate guy, because I know Sundays that can be a busy time for you guys.
It can.
But yeah, I love that. I mean, that's such that Calendly idea, how much time that can save you. And for those of us that aren't that organized, can organize you so well. So I love that. And that's, again, I think that's where technology is in our favor, and it's not
Absolutely.
overwhelming, even if you're not a millennial that's good at this stuff. What's another couple that you use, whether just from a productivity hack? Because I think that's an awesome one. If people aren't aware of it, I think it's awesome. What others?
Thank you. Yeah. So another one that I finally have gotten the hang of more. And again, I mentioned I read the 4 Hour Work Week when I was still working in oil and gas, but I didn't really know how to apply a lot of those principles because I didn't really have a business. I didn't have anything consistent. But now that I'm consistent in real estate, I mean, I had four transactions close in August, another 4 this in October, and I've got several under contract right now. And I used to be doing all the paperwork by myself, but I finally learned to delegate and kind of hire help in a way without committing someone to payroll. So it can feel daunting to bring on help, but there's virtual assistants and there's also people who do, like, for real estate transaction coordination, where it's almost like a contracted position, or you'll pay via PayPal or out of your commission at the end of a transaction. And so if you and I were to talk here for an hour on my podcast, before I would have sat there and recorded the whole thing and kind of like edited anywhere that needed editing. And now the process is streamlined where I upload it to a folder. One of my assistants edits it and tweaks anything. If there's any uhs or ahs that are just very kind of out there, he can remove those. I have another assistant who creates my YouTube thumbnail and a personal assistant who helps me with booking me on other shows. So it's all automated where I can basically, any request that I get in, I can send it to my real estate transaction coordinator to send paperwork out for me, or to my podcast editing team to have them tweak a thumbnail or cut something out of the podcast that I thought maybe, was a little too much noise going on in one part where it's not very clear, for example. And so delegation, that's another hack right there. If you can get a couple of assistants or a personal assistant, at least somebody to help take things off your plate, it allows you to scale yourself up. You can do so many more things because you can just have this other person handle, A, B, and C while you handle these other higher dollar, income producing activities.
Yeah, the outsourcing thing or delegating or empowering, however you look at that, this is huge, you guys, because you're literally saying, I'm going to go do what I'm really good at and what I enjoy doing and what's the highest return on my investment, i.e., closing transactions, doing the podcast. Because it's funny, you're not getting paid, quote unquote, as a podcaster, but some of these hacks are saving you so much money. So absolutely, you're getting paid.
Yes.
But talk about the outsourcing, because you even mentioned virtual assistants. And again, there's a generation of people that are like, what are you talking about? And then there's people that have really they figured this thing out and they're like, this is the best thing in the world. They don't have to be a W-2. They can literally be a 1099 or transactional, as you said. So where did you find these guys?
Absolutely. So sometimes the hardest part can be sitting down long enough to actually think through what you need and then putting the job posting on a site like upwork.com. That's one that I hear of a lot. There's another one. I haven't used this one personally, but onlinejobs.ph, I believe, for Philippines. I used upwork.com and I put up an ad for a personal assistant. I heard it on a podcast. Someone said, guys, you need a personal assistant. I don't care if you don't even know what to have them do. Hire one. You'll start to figure things out to give to them. And eventually you're going to realize it was the best decision of your life. And so I put up an ad over there like personal assistant needed, 5 hours a week, probably starting, but can scale up as I figure out what to do. And here are some of the tasks that I think you can do. And it started off with me thinking of like, I put in the job description, I need someone to help me book haircuts and massages and schedule things like non-real estate related stuff because I already have someone taking care of that. Who I found her, by the way, the transaction coordinator. I modeled the most successful agent that I knew who was making $600,000 a year. It's like, who is she using? That person's awesome. Because I was using a transaction coordinator before who I had to double check all her work because she wasn't even turning in documents that I needed. So I was like, why am I paying you if I'm not even getting things turned in time to get my commission check on time? And so modeling success, I took the transaction coordinator from the successful agent that I knew, and I took the initiative on Upwork to hire a personal assistant. And I actually gave her the job to find me the two other assistants to edit my thumbnails and to edit vlog videos for me too. So she hired those people out and I just paid her for it.
Wow, that's awesome, man. Well, let's talk about the mindset hacks, because reading, obviously, as again, 30, the amount of books you've already read, it's awesome. Your knowledge is going to continue to just exponentially grow. But what's some other mindset hacks that you have that have proven fruitful for you?
Yeah, so mindset hacks, I guess what I would start with is a really good morning routine. I think we may have talked about this when you were on my show. I talk about it a lot. The things that I love, and it's true. If you're a raving fan about something, you're going to talk about it and promote it, even if you're not getting paid to do it. So Hal Elrod's book, The Miracle Morning, was a huge one for me. I remember I read it on a trip to Greece in 2018 on the plane, and that just changed it all for me, where I was like, I can't wait to start doing this morning routine and doing the savers method, silence, affirmations, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing or journaling. And so that starts my morning off every single day. I have been tracking how long I've been doing it. And I haven't looked back at my 2019, but for 2020, I haven't missed a single day this year. I've done it every day on weekends, on a couple of flights. I know travel's been limited, but I did go to Colorado in August. And that's gotten me started in a very positive mindset where I'm not rushed anymore in the morning. So many times people wake up, oh, I missed this phone call, I'm late. They wake up 5 minutes before they're supposed to be on a Zoom call. You're setting yourself up for failure where you can't get your mind right. Whereas now, if you do a morning routine, I've already read, I've meditated, I've journaled, I've planned, I know what my action plan is for the day. I have a scorecard that measures the activities that I need to do to consider the day successful. Whereas when I first quit my oil and gas job, I woke up and made a cup of coffee and I was like, I guess I'm going to read. Like, what do I do today? Right. So I have a plan and I have measurable things that move the needle for my business. And so mindset, get your morning right, and your mindset follows. That's my first tip on mindset.
Yeah, brother, this is one of my favorite ones to talk about, and it's so true. It's just finding that routine that puts you in the best possible position to win every single
Yes.
day, right? And it sounds, when you say the word routine, I get it. People are like, really? Yes, routine. It's not boring. Actually, that allows you to have an exciting, amazing day, like I'm sure you do most mornings. My favorite question to ask, and you mentioned traveling to Greece. You said that you've traveled many different places, but the question is, what does freedom mean to you? It's my favorite question to ask every single guest.
I love that question. And I think my answer to what freedom means to me is kind of my answer to what entrepreneurship means to me, at least the perfect idea of it. And that's being able to do whatever I want with whomever I want, whenever I want. I mean, it's kind of like asking for unlimited wishes, I guess, from the genie, because it just sounds like that, right? That's too good to be true. But that's kind of my definition, because that's what I did on Friday. I was like, hey, I don't have anything on my calendar. I feel like getting better at indoor skydiving. I'm going to go do it. And I could justify it because I had my best real estate month. So I didn't feel bad to spend the money to go do that thing. I felt like, hey, this is my reward. And so freedom is, to me, is being able to do that. And I was thinking, I actually made a story about it. I was like, hey, I saw someone on my story today who's surfing in Hawaii, and I was a little bit jealous, but I'm here indoor skydiving while someone had to drive into the office and is looking at my story being like, I wish I could do what Chris did. So it's hard not to play the comparison game, but freedom to me is being able to do whatever you want whenever you want. But be careful with the social media aspect, because sometimes you might see the grass as greener on the other side, right? Like I was almost getting there. Like surfing in Hawaii is a little higher than iFly at the moment for me, but hey, I'll take iFly. That was cool.
Well, and you are certified in skydiving, is that correct?
Correct. So I'm certified in skydiving and in scuba diving. I'm not super amazing at either, but I'd like to get better at them for sure.
And I've never done the iFly. I've taken my kids several times, but is it comparable? Is it somewhat the same? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's pretty comparable, but I guess the difference is that it's a tunnel with wind blowing up at high speeds, which is a different feeling than free falling. And for those who haven't been skydiving, I mean, free falling is unlike a roller coaster. It's unlike anything else where it's just weird. You're even looking out in the sky. It doesn't even look like you're moving very much until you look at your altimeter and you realize you've dropped, thousands of feet over the course of 60 seconds. But it is pretty comparable. I felt kind of sore after I did 10 minutes in the tunnel, 5 2-minute sessions. And the next day I was like, oh, okay, like just from the wind blowing on my muscles, I guess I was like, my back's kind of sore. My shoulders are a little tight. Um, so that was the only difference, is that I felt like it was maybe more straining on your body because of the power of the wind tunnel.
Oh, it's
But
interesting.
maybe,
I just
yeah,
have never done it. I've watched my kids do it. I've skydived before, and it's awesome. But I never actually
yeah.
did the iFly. So now you got me thinking to do that.
It's worth pursuing, because I guess the equivalent, I mean, each minute, it's like doing a skydive, right? So 10 minutes is essentially going up in a plane 10 times and skydiving. So you're able to skill up a lot faster, because you're just literally like, I'm in there for 2 minutes, a couple other people go. He's like, okay, you ready to go again? 2 more minutes. And to tie that back to entrepreneurship, the more times you try things, the more times you fail, the faster you learn. I mean, I hadn't been in a year or two. When I got in the tunnel, I was kind of like, okay, it's kind of like snowboarding for the first time after not doing it for 3 years. You kind of know, but you're rusty. But by the fifth time, when I was doing my last 2 minutes, I was just like flying into the tunnel, doing 360s, and I was starting to get back into it very quickly. So I thought I would tie it back to entrepreneurship and success.
I
So
like
it's
it,
not
man. I
too
mean,
off
it's
tangent.
true. It's all kind of the same thing. However you apply it in life is get out
Yep.
there, continue to get better, get your butt kicked a few times, and then
Try it
you're
again.
gonna get
And get a coach, because I had a coach in there who was telling me things to do instead of me trying to figure it all out by myself.
It is funny, but it's the same routine. It just whether it's entrepreneurship or apparently I fly or you name it, that's the way it goes. Brother, what should
Yeah.
I ask you that I didn't know enough to ask?
What should you ask me? I guess maybe like, what should your main focus be or something? Like, what's my main focus in my business?
What's your main focus, Chris?
And I love that you asked that too. And that kind of caught me off guard. I was like, what is a good question? But that is something that differs for everyone, right? And I encourage everyone to take some time to write this down, journal about it, because I was getting very intentional when I mentioned I went to that trip to Colorado in August. I was at a really cool spot on Pikes Peak, high up in the mountain, and I took my journal out and I just started writing. And it was honestly kind of cold out there, and I didn't have a great jacket, so I was a little shivery. But I started writing out, what's my ideal state? It's not all about the hustle. I don't want to be doing 10 deals a month where I can't even relax or go to iFly or do these things. And so I started to plan out and have intention. Ideally, I'd love to do X amount of deals. I said, I think I did 2 deals a month at $415,000 price point. I could be making 25 grand a month from 2 deals with relatively little or no work from delegating things out. That would allow me to have a nice income to focus on my podcast and connecting with people and growing an audience, and eventually, having a course offering or coaching model or something like that. And so the things that I've written down on my whiteboard most recently that I want to focus on, I want to have 2 meetings in person or on Zoom calls just to connect with people, have no intention to sell them on anything, just have conversations like this. And I want to do 2 podcast interviews a week. So that doesn't even really tie to real estate in any direct way, but it's what I love to do most, and I learn a lot quickly. So that's kind of my advice for people, is to really take time to figure out what's important to you. Are you doing enough of that thing? And if not, how can you build that into your life?
So I'm a huge proponent of journaling, but I'm just curious why you do that. What is the purpose of you actually sitting on Pikes Peak overlooking this, badass, it's sick. If you guys haven't been, it's awesome.
View.
But what prompted you to say, I'm going to start journaling about my intention? Because I love it, but I want people to hear why you did that.
Yeah.
What was the purpose of the journaling at that point?
Yeah, so I actually carry my journal around all the time. I heard this from a podcaster. He carries a sketch pad where there's no lines or anything. So I'm not confined to the lines of a journal. It allows me to draw or think out ideas. And I just know that nature has that source of inspiration and creativity. And when I was there, it was relatively quiet. There were a few other groups hiking with us and whatnot, but it was so quiet and you feel so small, right? So whenever I'm looking out there at the vast wilderness and crazy endless mountains and trees, it's very easy to feel that small feeling where you're like, wow, all these problems that I thought I had, that client that's upset with me, that deals that's not working the way I want it to, none of that stuff really ultimately even matters that much. And it makes you bring your full self every single day, because you're like, hey, if I can write this stuff down and realize like, hey, today this is what matters, the infinite present moment. I'm here, I'm happy, I'm content, I'm breathing. I'm not focusing on the stuff that's not going well in my life in that point. And that allows me to go back to that, the stress and the phone calls and the emails, without being so worried about it. I'm just like that laissez-faire, like, hey, it's gonna all work out, and if it doesn't, we'll figure it out, and don't worry. And people love that in real estate or in any business, because a lot of times they can't control their emotions and their stress. So if they can see that you're remaining calm under pressure, right? Like, I'm here just not worried about, like, I don't know, COVID or 2020 or elections or anything. I'm thriving, having my best real estate month, um, creating awesome podcasts, connecting with you, JM, growing my podcast to new levels, and they just see that and they get inspired, right? So that's why I like to just journal, because when I have all these ideas and jumbling in my mind, to write down things, you have to be intentional about what's important, because you can't just type a million miles an hour. You only write so quickly. And so every word has way more meaning on paper. Long way. Sorry, I have long-winded answers. I'm just realizing that.
Oh, you're good, brother. I mean, I want people to hear it's just one of those things. It's hard to quantify, but this is free essentially. I mean, other than the price of a pen and paper, you can do so much. Well, brother, I love what you're doing. How can people connect with you online or go check you out so that they can hear more of your amazing tips and hacks and things that you're doing?
Thank you so much. So you can connect with me on Instagram is my most active platform. My IG handle is chrisbello09, or you could visit my website, chrisbello.com. If you go to chrisbello.com/free, that's where you can get that free productivity hacks guide, which has different hacks that I didn't mention today. And then my podcast as well, which you were on, of course, Entrepreneur Motivation Podcast. I currently publish 2 episodes a week on Monday and on Thursday. So thank you so much for letting me get my little plug in there, JM.
Brother, you're bringing so much value to the world. I think people go check it out, man. And this guy he's young, he's ambitious, he's smart, and he's doing some big things. You will get a ton of value, and you just get to meet another awesome person out there that's really making the world a better place. So, brother, I just appreciate what you're doing, man. You really are inspiring others and influencing others to be bigger and do better things. So I just love it, man.
Thank you so much. And once again, it was great catching up and connecting. And we got to do this again. I'll have you on my show again sometime whenever you're free.
We will definitely do it again for sure. Well, until next time, you guys also go to letsgowin.com. There's a free work-life balance form for you. You can check it out. I do it once a month just to check in, make sure I'm doing everything I need to be doing to show up as my best self as well. So in the meantime, you guys, until next week, continue to transcend in life. Thank you so much for listening. If this content is delivering value to you, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. That helps us build this community, and that is what we are all about. Building this community as big as we can, helping as many people as we can, and deliver as much value as possible. Be sure to head over to transcendinlifepodcast.com for information on my coaching courses, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Let's Go Win 365. Let's go win and transcend in life.
This is the Transcend in Life podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson, taking you from fear to freedom.